Hello, I'm Leslie Wilcox. This is one in a series of clips about how organizations are adopting cognitive automation, the experiences and their lessons. This one is looking at SEB, a major leading financial group in the Nordic countries. And they adopted IP Softs and Media in 2016 and utilized it throughout 2017. And it's a very interesting pilot usage of cognitive automation. Around this time, most organizations, if they were using cognitive automation, were merely piloting, prototyping, or even just proof of concept with cognitive automation. In this particular case, they chose to first pilot it safely, as it were, with the internal IT services help desk. And they identified 4 things that this chatbot would do. One of them, for example, was to deal with password reset requests. Another one was to steer the employee to the right services available from IT services. And this was implemented, and the results were very interesting and actually very beneficial. As you can see from the slide, one of the results was that they found that the software could execute 50% of the work without any human intervention. And they also found that this represented 15% of the overall call volumes going through the IT help desk at the time. Services were being delivered up to 5 times faster as a result of automation, and those services were a lot more consistent. And there was quite a lot of labor saving going on as well as a result of this. Subsequently, with this happy experiment, the experiment was extended into customer inquiries. And they identified a few common customer inquiries to actually point the cognitive automation tool at. Let's call it a cognitive virtual agent in this particular case. So one of them would be inquiries about how to become a customer. Another one would be inquiries about how to achieve cross-border payments. Another one would be a request for an electronic log-on ID. And this was prototyped with customer active involvement over a number of months quite successfully. And indeed, you can go on their website and see the progress that has been made since. So in both cases, very happy piloting of the cognitive virtual agent, both internally and externally. So they learned an awful lot, and they're extending greatly their use of cognitive automation now and in subsequent years. I think a couple of interesting learning points I would conclude on here. The first one is that the data challenge is still massive, even for quite small applications like this to start with. And one of the interesting data challenges they had here was, of course, that media had to be converted into Swedish from English, and that took 3 months in itself. And then there's getting the training data up and running and correct, and getting the machine to be at least as accurate as a human being in its responses. So that's one area where there would be learning. I would note a couple of other things. One is that cognitive automation is a lifelong learner as a tool. You can't just make it do something and then stop. It has to continually be updated with new data, but it's got flexibility to become broader in its responses and more accurate in its responses as a result. The other learning point I would make here is it's very interesting to think about where would you start your cognitive automation experiment. I would suggest at least 3 places to start. I mean, one would be where there's a pain point in the organization. So, for example, in one of the earlier clips, we saw that an organization had to meet a regulatory requirement by a deadline or incur a £2 million fine. And so they, in that particular case, they used robotic process automation. But that was an opportunity, and subsequently people realized that where they had a real business problem, they could now bring these types of technologies to bear. The second area where it might be useful to think of using cognitive automation is as part of a much larger digital strategy. And we saw that in the case of cognitive automation being applied at Deakin, which was trying to be very digital by 2020 and saw cognitive automation, in that case IBM Watson, as a immensely useful tool for scaling up to 100,000 students from 53,000 students. I think the other area that's obvious is the low-hanging fruit that many organizations have. As an example, it was at Zurich Insurance, where they had a claims handling process, and the claim handling, generally speaking, took an employee 59 minutes to deal with. This was reduced to 5 seconds as a result of applying cognitive automation. And the actual payoff here was, I believe, some $5 million return on investment in the first year, and it freed up some 39,000 hours as a result of the application of cognitive automation. Hours saved that employees could invest elsewhere in the business. So some interesting learning points here, but the major point Nicholas Mock made was that it's not really for him about cost saving, it's about the way in which cognitive automation can change the way that you operate quite fundamentally. And that, for him, seemed to be the payoff that really mattered.